Okay guys, that's enough. Can you put me down now? Thanks. Can you guess what we're making this week? It's officially spooky season. This is actually an iced London fog because it's still quite hot, but I can pretend. Let's talk about the costume design for Beetlejuice. And I'm talking about the original Beetlejuice. I haven't seen the new one yet. It just came out as of the time I am filming this today. But by the time this video comes out a week ago, I'm hoping to see it in the next couple of days and maybe I'll let you know what I think about it. So Aggie Garrard Rogers was the costume designer for the original Beetlejuice. She also did Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Witches of Eastwick, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Rent, Cocoon, Invasion of Body Snatchers, and that's only a few. Prolific, okay? Lady works. Now, let's specifically talk about Lydia Deetz' wedding dress from the original Beetlejuice, because love it. Who wasn't obsessed with that red dress? My God. Obviously that's what we're making today. Let's talk about it. So during the production of the original Beetlejuice, Rogers worked really closely with Tim Burton in designing the costumes. Some of them she designed herself, some of them she bought off the rack. Rogers found Barbara, Gina Davis's character, costume wedding dress first. She was looking for something outrageous and stupid to fit the kooky vibe of the movie. After showing Burton a few different images of some of the dresses she had picked out, they decided on one, and then Rogers came up with the idea of having Lydia's wedding dress be a copy of Barbara's, but in red. Burton liked the idea, and there you go. Looking at the two, you can see the similarities with the neckline, that collar around the neck, the sheer paneling on the chest. It's there, right? While grabbing some screenshots for reference images for myself for the costume, I was reminded of Tim Burton's Netflix show Wednesday, where Jenna Ortega wore that black fluffy dress to the prom. Do y'all remember that, this one? And I was like, was that on purpose? Because it looks a lot like the wedding dress. After doing some research, I found an interview in Bazaar with Colleen Atwood, who was the costume designer for Wednesday and is also the costume designer for the new Beetlejuice movie. In the interview, she's asked about that dress. She says she found it walking down Bond Street in London. So basically the black dress is off the rack from Alaya, this brand here that I don't know how to say the name of because I'm not bougie, and I don't shop there. And if she bought it because it reminded her of Lydia Deetz's wedding dress, she didn't say. So, there you go. History lesson out of the way, let's talk fabric and pattern. For the pattern, I made it myself, and no, I did not pattern draft this like a normal person. I pattern drafted it like a cosplayer, and wrapped myself in plastic and duct tape, and used that for the pattern. I don't have a bodice block, which I really need to make one of these days, because if I had the bodice block, I could have made this pattern, but I don't. So the easiest way for me, and for my brain, really, to wrap my head around, because I don't have any patterns that go up around the neck. If you've been with my channel for a minute, you may have seen this Katie Keene Valentine's costume I made, which obviously goes around the neck. I did not keep that pattern. No, I really should have, but sometimes, most of the time, while I'm working on a project, all the scraps and trash and everything kind of gets thrown in this corner over here. And when my office gets particularly messy, to actually sit down and like clean and separate everything requires too much from me. So in order to just get it done and start my next project, I just kind of like scoop everything and throw it away. I knew I would regret throwing away that pattern, but here we are. So, how you make this pattern, how I made this pattern, you start by wrapping yourself in plastic wrap. Yep, just go ahead and whoop, 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 all the way around. Make sure you get up here on your neck, it's important. you might need another set of hands, which I did because it's kind of hard to wrap yourself in plastic. And duct tape, which is the next step. So the next thing you're gonna do is wrap yourself in duct tape. Now, you do not want to take the roll of duct tape and just like pull it and stretch it across yourself. You want to take strips and lay them down, because if you pull, then you're going to flatten areas that shouldn't be flattened, and you're not going to get a great pattern. So make sure you pull strips off and lay them across you. After you get your whole self wrapped in duct tape, which is very sweaty, ew, you'll take a Sharpie and you'll draw the pattern on yourself. It's best to get a friend to help you with this one too, because obviously it's very hard to draw on your back. So find a buddy. Cut that off. I had my buddy cut it straight up the center back for me. And then I went through, and while the pattern was while the duct tape form of me was just around, just there, I kind of like straightened out some of the lines, and then you cut it all out. And you got this. These guys. Make sure you label the pieces before you cut them. And also add registration marks, especially for like princess seams. See, I got a little mark here and here and here. And it goes on the side too. So that I know these pieces go together and where. Very important. You will be very mad at yourself if you don't do that. So label your pieces, make your registration marks, and then cut everything out. After you get it cut out, I take tracing paper, and you can either lay the piece on top or put the piece underneath, and you trace around the piece. And then you'll want to take a ruler of some kind. I use my seam allowance ruler because that is the easiest thing for me. And you'll want to measure out some seam allowance plus a little smidge extra for some ease. If you only add seam allowance and don't add any ease, then it will fit extremely tightly, you know, like a glove, as they say. And don't forget to add your registration marks to your new paper pattern. Now we got a real pattern to work with. Now for fabrics. My dear friend, Justine, over at Red References, was so kind to send me some of this red, like a Swiss dot, I don't know what you call this, but it's the material that is her dress. And I'm so thankful for her. Thank you, Justine. We got our main fabric here. We have some tulle that Justine also sent me, but I might need to get some more. I don't know. Oh, there's more in here than I thought. Those, and then for the base of the dress, I have this satin. Is it satin? I think it's satin. Let's get this thread. There we go. Now, I did not pattern a skirt. So we can do the skirt two ways. We can either just cut out a big rectangle and then gather that up and attach it to the bodice. I can take my bodice pieces and use this, like the bottom here, to pattern out a skirt. And I think I'm gonna do the latter of the two options because I don't want a whole lot of bulk in my waist because there's already going to be this gathered red there. And the satin's a little thick, so we don't wanna have any more of that than we need in there. That's enough yapping out of me. Let's go ahead and put the base bodice together, shall we? We got the base of the bodice put together. I went ahead and used pinking shears on all the seams and the seam allowances just because I didn't feel like messing with the serger. And it's a costume. The way I construct costumes versus the way I construct my clothes is pretty different. My clothes I construct to last and wear and wash for years. My costumes, I don't do that. They are worn sporadically, never washed. Spray them with some alcohol to fine. This fabric is a little stiff and I wanted the seams to lay flat, so I went ahead and top stitched them because you won't see it with the flounce that we're gonna add to it. Fits pretty good. Now it's time to cut out the skirt. And these are my weird skirt pieces. I am stealing a trick from Black Snail, where you just take the top and add the length with the ruler. I want the outside of the skirt to be about 120 inches wide. How I measured this and figured this out was by taking measuring tape and laying it on the floor and going, yes, that seems about right. Now that we have that cut out, sewing it together is very simple. You just sew it up inside. done. The base of our skirt is finished. It's got a fair amount of swoosh to it. Tried it on with the petticoat. It's perfect. And now the skirt's done. The skirt's not done. The base of the skirt is, we're done with it for now. Now we need to move along back to the top. Looking at our reference image again, it looks like there's at least 4 layers of ruffles on the top. I think how I will do this is, this material is a little bit drapey and I'm a little afraid that it's just gonna be a little too limp for what we need. So I'm going to take each tier of the top ruffle and layer it with a layer of tulle so that it gives it more body. So I think, because it starts out kind of short and then they just kind of grow from there. I have to start cutting ruffles. We also need to figure out how long each one needs to be and how wide. First thing we're going to do is take the top of the blouse and measure it. This would be easier if I had my measuring tape up here, but it is downstairs for chainmail purposes. At the moment, 36. Okay, our yoke, full yoke, front and back is 36 inches. We want our ruffles to be what? Let's see, let's take some extra here. This is what double looks like, which is okay, but I think, at least for the top, we should do 3 times. Let's see what that looks like. Not perfectly spaced, but I think this is more of what we want. Now that we've done the math, you know that 36 inches, we need, how big do we want that first one? Looking at our reference, is that about that much? What is that? About 3 inches. Actually seems pretty close. So 3, 4, 6, and 8. There we go. 36 times 308. Top is coming along. So with this first set of ruffles, I've gone ahead and sandwiched it between the front yoke and the bodice, and a triangle is not easy to sew. Not easy. I did it by marking the very middle, like where the stitches would hit the V with a pen, and then sewed one side down and then turned it and pinned it and sewed the other side down. I don't know of a better way. If you know, let me know, because it was not fun. After sewing it down, there was a lot of bulk in the seam, so I went ahead and graded my seam allowance, and you can do this with anything really. It just helps cut down on the bulk. So I only graded the middle seam, which was the gathered ruffle part, and that cut down on the bulk a lot. But when you're grading seam allowances, you would just do, like, say you have 2 layers, then you would grade one slightly shorter than the other, and then 3 layers, same thing. Each layer gets just slightly shorter than the other. After I sewed it all down, I flipped the ruffle up so that it was facing the yoke, and then sewed the seam allowance down to the bodice. You won't see that top stitching because the ruffle is in the way. And then that gets the seam allowance out of the way. You can see it on this side where you can still see the seam allowance, and then this side looks nice. But then once you sew that down, you'll need to take it over to the ironing board to iron it down because it'll want to stick straight up. It was a terrible shirt to try this on with, but here we go. Side's done. Well, I mean, this one singular ruffle is done. I'm gonna do the same thing for this other side, and then we need to start putting the rest of the ruffles on. So I think originally I was going to flip each layer up and then sew it down like that and then flip it back over, but I think I don't need to do that. I think all I need to do is just add it to the bottom. So yeah, we're just gonna gather up each layer, pin it down, sew it down. Let's do this. So far so good, I think. It's a little itchy right here on the neck. Ugh. Oh, I forgot to mention, when you are gathering something, the best and proper way to do this is to run 2 lines of gathering stitches. And gathering stitches are the longest stitch that your sewing machine can do. And the reason why you want to do 2 lines is for 2 reasons. The first being that if one string breaks, you always have the second. And the second reason is because it just gathers more evenly and looks a little bit nicer. I'm trying to do a little bit more of like a tutorial and like giving little tips on how to do things, and then turns out I am a horrible teacher and I keep forgetting to tell you things. So when you gather something, when you run it on the longest stitch on your sewing machine, you want to be sure when you are pulling the thread to gather it, you are pulling the bobbin thread. That is very important because, contrary to what I actually believe, the sewing machine is not magic. And the way it works is that the bobbin thread kind of makes a loop around the top thread. So if you try to pull the top thread, it's going to cause some issues and you'll probably snap it. Now, I didn't do that. I just did one row of gathering stitches, which for something so thin, you can get away with. And I wasn't too worried about it being so even since it was like, there's a lot of it. I'm gonna go ahead and do this 2 more times and put the rest of the ruffles on. Strings everywhere. So this should have only taken me maybe an hour or 2 tops, but it took me 3 days because I got tired in the middle of making this and then sat down on the floor, which for me is always the worst idea ever. Never let me sit on the floor if I'm supposed to be doing something, because then it turns into floor time and I'm just hanging out on the floor. Can't get me back up. No. So the top is done. I think there's more red, like bodice base, showing than I had initially planned for. And it does look like she has some kind of sash on. So at the very end, with whatever fabric I have left, I'm gonna make a little sash to go here on the middle. So on days when I'm working in the office and I know I really want to get a lot done, I will make a girl's dinner to bring up here with me. Usually it involves fruits, cheese, little snacks, just, you know, little things I can pick on all day, because for whatever reason, munching and working go hand in hand with me. But today, I have a watermelon half to munch on. My last watermelon of the season, and it reminded me of this one time I was having a watch party and the first girl to shows up with half a watermelon and a wooden spoon. So I opened the door to greet her and I'm like, hey, how are you doing? Look down, noticing the half a watermelon. She notices me noticing half her watermelon. And before I can even finish my sentence, she lets me know, this isn't for sharing, this is mine. And then proceeds to eat it with a wooden spoon that you can tell she's struggling eating this watermelon with this wooden spoon. This was like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. It is a core memory in my mind. Makes me laugh every time I think about it. She wasn't being mean. That was her dinner or something. I don't know. Just wanted to make it known before there was any confusion. Watermelon, not for sharing. So this was not hard to do. This would have been a lot easier to do if I would have started with the bottom layer first. Why didn't anybody say anything when I started this? You guys, rude. It was a lot more work to do it the other way around. I was trying to like finagle all these layers. Look at this. This is a monster. She's done. And if you're wondering about the neck, I'm gonna do that very last just because I don't feel like it. This is like a hot mess on the inside too, look at this. But that's okay, because it's the inside and nobody sees it. Anyways. Okay, moving along to the skirt. So we don't need the skirt tiers to be quite as full as the bodice tiers. In the reference images, I mean, they're full, but I don't think they're not as crazy as the top. So we're only gonna do 2 times instead of 3. And that's mostly because I'm afraid I don't have enough fabric. So we're gonna have to do some fabric math to figure out if I have enough. Gathered math is confusing, but I think I got it. Okay. Or we're able to get 10 inches long strips of fabric out of what we have left over here. And then each strip is 64 inches long. Okay, for the first layer, we'll do 1.5 strips, which will be 96 inches long, which is more than we need. And then for the second and third tiers, since those are very close in size, we'll do 2.5 for each one, which is 160, still more than we need. 3.5 for the fourth layer, and then 5 for the bottom layer, which would give us 320, and we only need 224. It'll be more gathered than I had intended it to be, well, than I thought it would be, which is great. I have an idea. To check my layers, because I'm really afraid that the layers are not going to be able to overlap as much as I need them to, I'm gonna cut out some sheets of paper that are 10 inches deep, and then put them on the skirt and see how that looks. All right, after only a little bit of tiers, finally figured out my gathering math, and now it's time to attach these tiers to the skirt. We're going to start with the bottom tier first because we learn on this channel. The bottom tier is also our biggest tier and has the most pieces in it. So first thing we're gonna do, sew those pieces together. Then we're gonna divide those pieces into 8 equal parts. You fold it in half, mark it, fold it in half again, mark it again. Now you have your 8 pieces. My dress is already divided into 8 pieces because there's 8 panels in the skirt. Technically there's only 7 panels in the skirt because the center panel doesn't have a center seam, but we'll fold it in half and then there you go, now you have 8. Normally, how I would do gathers, and how you should do gathers if you really want them to be even, I like to run a gathering stitch between each of the 8 sections. So then I have 8 sections to gather separately, which makes it a lot easier than trying to gather a piece that's 37 yards long. After you do the gathering stitches, you would pin it to whatever you're pinning it to in the equal sections, and then gather each section. Makes it a lot easier, makes it a lot even, very nice. But this time I decided to try a new technique, which is to go with the same step up until the gathering stitches. I connected my top fabric with the tulle, and I just used a gathering stitch for that just because it's a lot quicker. And then take the 8 sections, pin them to my skirt, and instead of gathering each section, I just take it over to the machine and just kind of shove each section through the machine and just like gather it with my little fingies as I'm sewing. Turned out okay. Listen, it's not even and it's not perfect, but how I rationalize this is that Beetlejuice made this dress out of thin air. I can't imagine he paid a whole lot of attention to how even the gathers were. So, take that. This is canon. All right, so we got the bottom tier done, and now we need to do the rest of the tiers. We got 4 more. Hooray. I'm going to assembly line this shit and get it done. I'm not gonna show you how to do it again because it's the same thing. I think we all get it now. So let's do some editing magic and get it done. Now that we got the skirt finished, we need to attach the top. Now, unless we have done something just absolutely bizarre, we should be able to line up all the seams of the top with the seams of the bottom, and they should go together like a dream because we drew the pattern off at the top. So line up those seams, sew straight across it. Now we're gonna grade the seam allowance again. 1, to get rid of the bulk, and 2, because tulle is very, very itchy. So I want to make sure that I have the tulle layer shorter than the 2 satin layers so that it'll sit between those and not poke me. And we have a full dress. This is a monster. Oh, the beast right here. Goodness. Heavier than I thought it would be, but she's looking good. Now we gotta attach the collar. Should I have put the collar on before I attached the skirt? Yes, thank you for asking. I really should have, because this is a lot to finagle, so lesson learned. For the collar, again, tulle is very itchy, so I want to do a French seam, a France seam. So you do this by attaching wrong sides together, so a slightly shorter seam than you would normally do. Trim that down very short to just a few millimeters over the stitch line, fold that over, and then do another seam to encase the raw edges inside that little bit there. Now, I messed up on this, so I had to take another step and top stitch the collar so that it would sit up straight because I attached it upside down. But she's on. She's a little floppy. Last thing we need to do, besides making the sash, which is just a rectangle, and then I'll like probably hand stitch it down, is we need to put in the zipper. I have this red zipper. It does not match the red of the dress, but I don't really care. So we're just gonna install the zipper in the way that you install zippers. Okay, that's it, you guys. This is finally done. I got a little things to do here and there, like cutting some strings, but for the most part, she is done. She is ready. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go to the reveal. Well, that was fun. That's blue. And I don't have it. Just one more time. Oh, a false seam.